Hey, it's Dr. Brad with the latest space news, and Boeing is one step closer to being space Uber, a space taxi service. So Boeing has been trying to develop called the Starliner 100. Think Dreamliner for airplanes, but now Starliner. And the goal here is to ferry NASA astronauts from the ground to the space station so NASA doesn't have to do it themselves. Now, this all actually starts when the US decided to retire or defund the space shuttle. The space shuttle was really complicated, very expensive. In fact, every shuttle launch costs on average $1.5 billion, with the B, dollars. So NASA said, hey, why don't we work with some private companies and they can give us a ride to the International Space Station. Now, SpaceX and Boeing were awarded contracts. We saw SpaceX develop their capsule. Now they're already on their fourth crew of astronauts having Ubered or taxied to the space station for NASA. And Boeing's been trying to do this, but they've had a few problems. And that is because this test that they've now successfully done, what we call the Orbital Flight Test 2, the previous two times they had a lot of issues. Firstly, they had a software problem, so it's kind of like they went into space and into the wrong orbit, like merging into the wrong lane. Then they had some problems filling up. But this time, they nailed it. Third time proved lucky for Boeing on their quest to being a private space taxi service for astronauts and then in the future, other people. So you may in the future hop on a Boeing airplane to go to a launch pad to take a Boeing capsule into space. That's kind of the vision here, is a cheap, reusable, accessible way into space. Now that this test is over, it's launched, it seemingly has worked, they've landed back down. NASA will do some testing and further kind of review of this mission with Boeing to say, is it ready? And if it is, 2 NASA pilots will test it hopefully later this year for it to enter full space taxi service next year. And speaking of flying, NASA celebrated its 25th flight of its drone Ingenuity on Mars. Now, this whole project has been a remarkable achievement. The air, or the density of air on Mars, is really weak. There's not a lot of air, especially when compared to the Earth. And since planes need air to give them drag and fly, it's a remarkable challenge to do. So to put this in a scale, flying on the surface of Mars is like if you were to fly about 30 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And now airplanes here fly around 8 to 10 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. So they fly in a really high condition that we just didn't think worked. Now, this drone, Ingenuity, flew about 700 meters at a speed of around 20 kilometers an hour. And this is amazing because the rovers, as scientifically awesome as they are built for science rather than speed. Their top speed is about 140 meters per hour. So this thing just blows it out of the water and is amazing to watch. And we just recently have had this video released from ESA's Solar Orbiter. Now, this video has come from what we call the perihelion, or closest approach to the sun. And it's offered a remarkable view of the subtle detail and activity on our star. You can see what we call the coronal loops or coronal ejections coming off the sun. The sun is essentially a big ball of magnets. Imagine your frig magnet, but now on steroids. And as this activity changes on the sun, you get little eruptions and sometimes big eruptions. And this up-close and personal view of it is offering some amazing insights into what's happening near the surface and on the outer edges of the sun. Hopefully, we can use this to better understand not just the activity of the sun, but predict things into the future like solar weather and solar storms that affect us here on Earth. And finally, Mitsubishi is proposing to work with partners to 3D print antennas in space. Now, one of the problems we have with putting things into space is there's a limit on how big we can make them. Not just because of their weight, but physical size. There's a limit to how wide a rocket can be, and therefore how big the stuff we can put in it. Now, the bigger the antenna, the better, because this allows us to see or hear more sensitive radio signals, more power for our communications, and transfer more data. So bigger is better when it comes to radio antennas. So Mitsubishi is looking at creating a new type of material, a resin, that when it gets into space, sunlight, the intense sunlight in space, activates it and helps it to grow or print in space. And this may solve a real technical challenge for our future space exploration using some really creative material and our own sun. So I hope you enjoyed this catch up on the latest news of space, and make sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube to help me keep making more awesome space videos.